Welcome to the launch of the Eduardo Carrillo Comunidad de Califas, our virtual exhibition opening today, February 3rd, and running through April, May, June, July. We'll keep it up for a while since we're virtual. My name is Shelby Graham, and I'm the director of the Mary Porter Sesnon Art Gallery here at UC Santa Cruz. And I'm really excited to be here and share this stunning exhibition with you. I'd like to welcome alumni, students, faculty, and staff. UCSC alumnus Regent is here tonight, UCSC trustees. We have art historians, program reps from Cultural Arts and Diversity at UC Santa Cruz. Museum professionals are here from the Crocker Art Museum, the Monterey Museum of Art, the Los Gatos Museum of Art, the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History, the Center for Photographic Art, and thank you to all our donors past, present, and future. And thanks for joining us tonight. Before we begin, I'd like to just do a short land acknowledgement for the land at UCSC and the surrounding area, and encourage all of you to find your local land acknowledgement in your area. Also, don't forget the footprint we're all making with technologies here and Zoom platforms and other things affecting our land and our lives. The land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Owaotwa speaking Yupi tribe. The Amamutsin tribal band, comprised of the descendants of indigenous people taken to Mission Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the central coast of California, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and to heal from historical trauma. So with that, I'd like to welcome you to our virtual space. And here I am sitting in the gallery. This webinar will be recorded and posted in a few days on our Sesnon Gallery YouTube channel. And Louise Leong will be spotlighting our guests tonight. And thank you, Louise Leong, our gallery manager and preparator here at the Sesnon Gallery. She's been fabulous with all her attention to detail and making this exhibition come alive. Thank you. Please use the chat button at the bottom of the screen to chat or send a comment. It's like a guest book for Eduardo Carrillo, as well as asking questions to our panelists. And our program is going to be an exciting 1 hour, and we'll give you a virtual tour of this gallery. And this virtual 3D model was made by Colleen Jennings from the Arts Division. And we are so lucky to have Colleen on staff. She's a recent graduate of the Digital Arts New Media program with MFA, and she is a expert in 3D virtual models, and we're so lucky to have her. A big thank you to our intern, Madison Garay, the Claire Wedding Scholarship intern. She's been here for the past 2 quarters, and she's been the assistant curator, selecting work, choosing this brilliant wall color. And so thank you, Madison. And also thank you to our technical support from Edie Troutwine, our Chancellor's undergraduate intern, and she runs the Sesnon Underground program, which is fabulous. Also thanks to the Arts Division here at UC Santa Cruz. Ted Warburton, our interim Dean of the Arts, always encourages us to collaborate and make brilliant work together. So thank you, Ted. Also, thanks to Allison Carrillo for endowing the Carrillo Scholarship for our art students to benefit, and that's been fabulous. And thank you to Betsy Anderson for her leadership in the Museo Eduardo Carrillo and all of our collaborating partners for this project, the Califas Legacy project with the Museum of, the Monterey Museum of Art, the Santa Cruz Art League, the Moving Parts Press with Felicia Rice. And we'll be talking a lot about the Califas Legacy project, and that is both an exhibition and a book, and it's on display right now at the Museum of Monterey Museum of Art, as well as the Santa Cruz Art League, and now here at UC Santa Cruz. Once again, Eduardo Carrillo is bringing us all together. I think that's going to be the theme for tonight, and Eduardo Carrillo did it so well. This virtual exhibition showcases his work from his early days at UCLA to his teaching career here at UC Santa Cruz. Also, we are going to hear from our distinguished guests and highlighting the groundbreaking 1982 Califas conference that was here at UC Santa Cruz and now is on the UC Santa Barbara Special Collections Archive. And we've made clips from this conference. Let's see, we just want to highlight again that Ed was instrumental in creating a Chicano Califas community. And with that, I'm going to introduce our distinguished guest for tonight. We have, and maybe Louise, you can help bring them on screen. We have Amalia Mesa-Bains, who's an artist and cultural critic who has worked to define a Chicano and Latino aesthetic in the United States and in Latin America. She's a professor emerita from the Visual and Public Art Department at California State University, Monterey Bay, and MacArthur Fellow, as well as her work is collected worldwide. So we could go on with all her books as well. Also, Philip Brookman is here tonight, and he has been a consulting curator with the National Gallery of Art since 2014, where he organized the critically acclaimed work of photographer Gordon Parks. Philip's had many jobs and written many books, but what I love about him is Philip was the first director of the Mary Porter Sesnon Art Gallery. He started in 1976, and the gallery actually opened in 1971, 50 years ago. So the next is Irene Juarez O'Connell, who's going to be speaking, and she's a community-based artist inspired by the Mexican muralist tradition and the Chicano movement of the 1960s in Los Angeles. She's passionate about uplifting marginalized voices through public art, mentorship, and organizing roles. And then along with Irene, we'll be hearing from Victor Cervantes, who is a prolific artist, visual arts consultant, and college instructor. Cervantes served as the art director of the nonprofit Quinto Sol, which works with youth to empower neighborhoods through artistic expression. And we're going to have a follow-up on February 17th event to discuss murals and cultural erasure, both Victor and Irene. But what we'd like to start right now is to start with a clip, a 2-minute clip of Eduardo Carrillo, so you can kind of get a sense of him, and then we'll continue our conversation.
Like a lot of what went on.
Eduardo Carrillo was open to many, many different points of view because he was not just an artist, but he was a professor, an intellectual. The thing about Eduardo that I can relate to in many ways as a scholar and an artist is how difficult it was in our generation of Chicanos to take on multiple roles. So to be both, and then on top of that, to be an organizer as he was, expanded it even further.
My whole interest in learning about my culture, Mexican culture, came about in like 1966.
So I think that Eduardo Carrillo's sustaining of his roots in San Ignacio and La Paz, it gave him a special kind of insight. I really love the landscape works that Eduardo Carrillo did because I think they are some of his most classic moments of spirituality. He makes these landscapes that look as though what is missing is the myth, and the myth could land at any moment in those paintings.
It seems like a lot of what went on at the moratorium was actually mirrored in this imagery of the painting we had just finished.
Unlike many other murals that were painted in that era, really were about a moment of resistance.
This, in a sense, kind of changed my ideas as to what I was and what was happening in the whole social movement or the civil rights movement.
His legacy is in his individual work, but I think even more so in his dedication to learning, so that the thing you stand for, which is bigger than who you are, the thing you stand for will live on.
Great. Yeah, Amalia.
Well, I have the honor to be speaking today as a part of the larger Califas project started by Allison Carrillo and Betsy Anderson. And I've worked with many of the people here today, Felicia Rice and others. And so I'm very happy that his home base, his original, institutional life, which began at UC Santa Cruz, is recognizing him and honoring him. I keep thinking back because this is pretty much a 40-year retrospective view. And I have to tell you that I was not as aware then as I am now about how profound that gathering was. It was 1982. I would say the Galería de la Raza, for example, had begun, like many of our organizations, in the early 70s. So we were really only 10 years into the movement. And where we are now in terms of Chicanx and Latinx is a whole world away from that. This is 40 years ago. But I did find, in listening to some of the clips from the original conference, that we had actually come upon some of, I think, the most foundational issues that are still in some ways relevant and pertinent now. To talk about Eduardo, as I said in the video, is really to talk about someone who was what they call polymaths now, or the Renaissance men and women of our generation. And there really wasn't anything much in place yet in terms of an art history. Jacinto Quirarte had done a book, I think, in the 70s. Tomás Ibarra Frausto contributed to some of the understanding of that. And it was really Eduardo, along with Jose Montoya, who were the first Chicano artists to become part of university faculties. So they occupied a really unique position. What I go back and think about the most is Tomás's term convivencia. He always uses it when he brings ideas to the forefront. And he thinks of it as very seminal to the condition of the Chicano movement, convivencia. So I think of it when I think of Eduardo, because his greatest grace in all of this, besides his talent, his intellect, and really was his convening, his generosity in bringing us all together. I mean, I look at the pictures now and I have to laugh because, I keep complaining about my bad hair day. But what I'm really talking about is that we were quite young. We were quite young then. Some were in their 30s. I think I was probably close to 40. And we had two generations at that gathering. The first generation, which were largely men, many of the muralists whose works have been whitewashed and who were really struggling with a sense of tremendous loss after the very potent onslaught of the Chicano organizing. I think it was really very crushing to them to see the work that they had put their whole heart into being whitewashed and erased. So the convening gave us a chance to talk across those two generations. And in that sort of polymath way, many of the people there were not just visual artists. There were writers and playwrights. Luis Valdez was there. Many of them, like Ibarra Frausto and others, were theater and literary people. We had visual artists from the larger field coming together. And I think of it now as the first state of the art of Chicano art, because there really was no other gathering, at least in California prior to that would have allowed us to have those conversations. And I listened to my younger self earlier today, talking in a very, I think, not quite developed way, a very naive way, about form and substance. So what I'm saying to you is that he allowed us to come together and begin to talk about not just who we were, but what we were doing and why we were doing it. And so that substance and form conversation has gone on for years. it is the backbone of many of the observations we made later, when not only did they do murals and printmaking, which followed in a Mexican tradition of Posada and of the Tres Grandes, but we also have begun to talk about later retablos, painting on tin, the role of the altar, the ofrenda, the descanso. All of these things began to, in a way, embody the narrative of Chicanos. And so substance and form was clearly tied. When I think about it now, and it was sometimes for some of us the first time we'd all been in the same room together. And I laugh because Judy Bach and I had a joke for years that people would mistake us because we were never in the same room together. And only once since then had we been, and that was at UC Santa Barbara when they did the women's conference. I believe that was in the 90s. So this was the first time we'd all been together. Carmen León, Judy Baca, Esther Hernandez, Yolanda Lopez. So the mujeres, the comadres, as I call them. And that was in some ways characteristic of the second wave of the Chicano movement, was the rise of women, the emergence of their forms and their narratives and their concepts. I look back now, and for me, it is a much greater understanding of what we took on in those days and who we were. At times, as our years have passed and the careers have intensified, we don't get to see each other, except now on Zoom, of course. But I really cherish those early gatherings when people could come together to talk about their values and their work and their role in the community. Because that's one of the things that I think we don't talk enough about, because we fasten onto the idea of an individual artist. But what makes Chicano art in its early inception so much more vivid for me than many, many other art forms is its relationship to community. So I often say that art is the vehicle, but community is the object. So I want to end by saying that I think these conversations set the foundation for later writings and theories and the development of Chicano art history, as well as the artists themselves. Thank you.
Wow. Well, thank you for bringing that Califas community into the conversation. And now we'd like to hear, from Philip, who helped organize this groundbreaking 1982 Califas conference here at UC Santa Cruz, and share with us, kind of what it's all about, and then we'll have more questions after that. Thanks, Philip.
Okay. I want to thank everybody involved here today, especially Amalia, who is one of the people I feel like I really learned from in my career. And I was involved in organizing with Eduardo and a group of others the Califas Chicano Art and Culture in California conference. And it took place in 1982, and over a weekend in April of 1982. And one thing I want to mention is that it really was a project that grew out of an exhibition from the year before. So I'm going to show a couple of images of the conference, just so you all get a sense of what it looked like. And on the screen now is you see a group of speakers at the conference. Tomas Ibarra-Frausto on the left, and Amalia's there, and Sue Martinez, and Renee Yanez. Amalia, help me out. Is that right?
Yeah, that's Renee.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. And so next slide. Let me just go through these slides. Next slide. And as Amalia described it, I mean, it really was a kind of convening brought together by Eduardo Carrillo, certainly, but he worked with a number of others to, kind of decide an agenda for this whole thing. And in some ways, looking back now on these pictures that I picked to show, I see it as a kind of celebration it wasn't only just, a kind of traditional conference in which people gave papers. Really was a pretty wild discussion of innovative ideas, I would say. On the left, you see Jose Montoya, Eduardo Carrillo in the middle, and then Juan Fuentes on the right. And I think, the one thing that came up just a bit earlier that I think was interesting is that Jose and Eduardo were two of the very first Chicano professors in the California university system. Jose was teaching at Cal State in Sacramento. And I think in some ways they understood the kind of really groundbreaking importance of that position in bringing people together. And neither were scholars, but I think they certainly understood the importance of beginning to bring about a sense of the history of what was going on, and make sure that people could see it and talk about it and begin to understand it. So that was really the genesis of this conference. Next slide. Thank you. On the left, Luis Valdez from El Teatro Campesino, and Judy Baca in the middle. Or is that Amalia? I think it's Judy Baca there. No. And on the right is Malaquias Montoya, the printmaker. And I see a comment that Esteban Villa got hired at Sacramento State before Jose Montoya. So we're wrong about that, but thank you, Tere Romo. So let me see the next slide then. The conference took place not only at UC Santa Cruz, in this kind of idyllic environment, but also one day we went to San Juan Bautista and convened at the Teatro Campesino Theater, and there were performances and poetry readings, and I think it was a chance for people to really kind of share a little bit beyond just the discussion, but also the kind of energy that came behind the art that was being talked about. And on the left, Jose Montoya again reading a poem, and on the right, Willie Jaron and Los Illegals, his band, or the band Los Illegals that he was part of. And they had created a interesting set, which I didn't really remember now, but a set that to me looks a little bit like Washington, D.C. today, but it's barbed wire across the front. And, the musicians, there are several others that are not in this scene. And then let me see the next slide. Thank you, Louise. And then, so one of the things that's important to remember about Califas is that it did grow out of an exhibition that happened in April of 1981, a year before. And then following that, it's like so much had been talked about and learned. I myself got involved in organizing some other exhibitions, around the themes and ideas that came out of that conference. And one of the groups that had been there and was involved is OSCO. And so we organized at the Sesnon Gallery what I think is one of the very first sort of gallery exhibitions of their work. And it was a really interesting experience, not only for people who saw it, but also for students to understand, a little bit more about, what was going on out in the world beyond, what you would normally read about in the art magazines. And so let's take the slides down now. And
I'd love to do a talk someday on OSCO. I mean, that we get a lot of calls about OSCO, and anyway, so that's why this Eduardo Carrillo clearly opens up the box for us to kind of continue.
I want to say that I think it's important to know that Willie Heron that we saw with Los Ilegals was a member of OSCO and a fantastic painter. So many of the artists were also musicians.
And his art was in the exhibition. So I found an old poster of the Califas exhibition. It was called an exhibition of Chicano artists in California. I'll just mention the names of the artists who were in this. And it was in, as I said, April of 1981, Judy Baca, Eduardo Carrillo, Roberto Chavez, and Rupert Garcia, Carmen Lomas Garza, Willie Heron, Ralph Maradiaga, Sue Martinez, Jose Montoya, Malaquias Montoya, Ramses Noriega, Ernie Palomino, the Real Chicano Air Force from Sacramento, of course, Salvador Torres from San Diego, Esteban Villa, and Rene Yanez. That was the group in that initial exhibition. And it really did, it sparked, what happened the next year, because all of these artists came together around this first exhibition, works that, many of us had not seen before. And then that sparked, this discussion of sort of how much had to be done to bring out the energy of what was happening in the works of art. And so I think it was really Eduardo and myself and another person who worked at UC Santa Cruz, and that was Tino Esparza. And together we, sort of formulated the idea for a conference. And it was Ed who, then began to call people, and, he had this network of people and bring, he was able to bring the group together. And then I think really the last thing I want to say was just how, I remember now the experience as being something that was in some ways experimental. It wasn't something that had really happened before, at least at the university, or in an academic setting like this. And, it was really happening in sort of alternative spaces in urban settings, like in the Galleria de la Raza in San Francisco. That's one example. And in Sacramento and in San Diego and in Los Angeles, that's really where conversations like this were happening. But they were very decentralized. And so this was, I think, the first time all of these people had been brought together. And I think that some of these early ideas that were discussed at the conference are very much relevant today. And, I was reading a recent book about Latinx photography, which has really just been published. And in it, the author credits, Amalia, you look like you have something you wanted to. No, okay.
No, I'm just thinking about it.
Yeah, the author credits the Chicano Art Resistance and Affirmation exhibition, which was organized at UCLA, as being the real genesis of the dialogue. And, it made me think back to, certainly the Califas project, which began in 1981, the conference in 1982, exhibitions, and then, a large documentation project that then it kind of extended through the decade. All of that happened before the Cara exhibition, and I think it informed and in some ways was a kind of genesis, a point of genesis of a lot of things that have happened, not only in California, but around the country. So there's so much more I could say about this, but I think I'm going to turn it back to you and continue the conversation through questions and
Yes.
dialogue.
Absolutely. Great. My internet is a little spotty. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so anyway, so what I want to tie this back into is once again is Eduardo Carrillo, and what we did actually in the Monterey Museum of Art did a second conference, a Califas conference that they have posted on their website, and we'll link that back in. But right now we're going to do a virtual walkthrough of the gallery just to show you what we've been putting together, and we want to continue this dialogue throughout, and also reference back to this groundbreaking conference. So Louise, can you go ahead and share that video? And I'm going to speak quickly as we zoom through this, but know that you can go back in on your own and you can go back in with Louise. Okay, or Louise will show us. So here's our beautiful entrance to the gallery. We walk in and you see our title wall, which we always do. This is kind of nostalgic. I feel like I'm going in the gallery. You know, we have a place for a curator's statement. We have this beautiful piece. And then here we have the list of artists who are in this exhibition. Many are of the Califas project, starting with Eduardo. And then we've divided the gallery into several rooms with color-based coding. And this is a Comunidad. You can see this shows our walls, both his watercolors and his oil paints. So it really is a comprehensive show. This piece off to the right called Two Brothers Fighting, that's one that Philip chose, and I want to hear later why that's one of your favorites. This is part of the community wall. And as Judith Bacchus said, that Chicano art starts with community. Then we go into the spirituality room, and we have this really fabulous piece by Eduardo, and we have right next to it we have Carmen León, who did a response to this piece and of her Snake Woman. So we asked legacy artists to pair some of their work with with Eduardo's work. This one to the right, that piece is one of my favorites called The Place. So we wanted to highlight. Here we have Amalia Mesa-Bains, her installation of Sor Juana. It's a library installation at Smith College. And then to the right is Eduardo's piece. Then you zoom into the back room, which is all about identity. We have a series of self-portraits by Eduardo from 1960 to the 90s, and a little blurb. So you can go back in and just read like who was Eduardo. And this is for our students as well. Then we have a next perspectives room where we have some recent graduates, and this is Jennifer Ortiz here and on the entrance wall. And then we go into the room and we see some of our other artists here. And within it, we have Victor Cervantes, Jorge Gonzalez, and this is Karina Perez to the left, and then Victor Cervantes mural there in the middle, and then Jose Gonzalez. And so Jorge Gonzalez, sorry. And then we have Beach Flats mural that is by Irene O'Connell, and she's gonna talk about that. We also zoomed past Natalie Ortiz, but then we have a room divided into labor and leisure. So this is the leisure wall. And then we have Felicia Rice, this beautiful broadside that she collaborated with Eduardo Carrillo on. Eduardo did the drawing and Frances Alacan did the poetry. And in here you can see we divided here again into labor, and there's some beautiful oil painting and watercolors. And you'll be able to zoom in to these much slower than we're doing now, but you can imagine. And then here is this beautiful these large paintings. And the great thing about a virtual gallery is we can put work outside and it doesn't get wet. So in this case, we have the mural or the painting on the left by Ralph de la Vieira, and it's called The New Boogeyman, which is a scary painting. And then to the right is Las Tropicanas by Eduardo. And then once again, our front gallery wall, we have a poster and then a beautiful piece by Eduardo of the sacrifice of the head and heart. And it is 11 feet by 7 feet. So we can barely fit that in the gallery. But I just wanted to give you all a glimpse at how we're putting together these virtual exhibitions these days in the Sesnon Gallery. And we want you to kind of, take a trip into the gallery, zoom in, and you can manually push going from wall to wall. And I'll let Louise is going to kind of take you through that at the end of our program. But right now we want to hear from two of our other artists who are showing with us and talk about Victor Cervantes, his experience working with Eduardo as a student, because many of our current students hear about Eduardo, but they only know about the Eduardo Gallery, the senior gallery, or they know about the Eduardo Carrillo Scholarship. And so I'd like Victor and Irene to kind of talk about your experiences with Eduardo and then the mural projects that are also part of his legacy.
Excuse me. Well, I just want to, looking at the video, it brought back memories of Eduardo. The first time I met him was at the Porter Dining Hall. And I think it was the first week, the first month when we get to maybe talk to someone who might mentor us throughout the year or throughout the academic journey. And I remember just his eyes, he had this very laid back presence to him. So, you know, anything that was going on with you, he could just calm you down, you know, just by sitting there and talking to you. And I was like, okay, you know, like everybody talked about it, but it was like, I went back and I was like, what's going on here? Because I expected this guy, like, yeah, because I heard about how involved he was. And so it took until I went back again to do a couple of talks about my work, and he asked about what I wanted to do. Then I really got to kind of know him and his spirit. And I was grateful because he introduced me to a lot of the things that to this day influence my work. And well, definitely was culture, right? So he told me, you know what, read this book. And I remember him the day he gave me a book and told me, you got to read about Siqueiros. You probably like his work. And so I took it because I knew about Rivera, but I never heard about Siqueiros or Orozco and then I think Siqueiros wrote a manifesto, artist manifesto about art. And I just got so turned on when I read his words. And I was like, it touched my heart. It's like, yes, this is why I want to do work. And so throughout my journey as a student, Ed was always very supportive. And I looked at his video before our meeting, and he did talk about, you know, this thing about, like, you know, he said this that resonated with me. He said like, people always expect you to know about your culture, but you never learned it. School never taught it to you. The academic setting, the college institutions, nobody ever didn't share those stories. So for me, it was the same. And I'm glad that I got to take part in his, you know, those opportunities to just be mentored by him, and reminding me of me going as a student to my own home community, and friends saying like, hey, why don't you talk about those Aztec stories that you brought up the other day? You know, I'd sit down with friends in the backyard with a fire, and we talk and share things. And that just made me think, wow, you know, it's kind of like our young people as youth, as Chicanos, we have this longing for cultura, for raíces, right? To ground us. And when we don't have it, then we got to create it ourselves. So that's why we got, you know, pride in neighborhoods, right? Because you're creating that cultura that was denied to you in the textbooks. And actually in the back, it's a painting I did in my first year as a student. And it's 2020 because I read a book about Aztlán. We had to do a painting about a theme, and the theme was mythology. I forget what it was. And it's like everybody was doing about Greek mythology. And they're like, well, I'm going to do it about my cultura. So, you know, you can't tell, but it's about, you know, the Southwest. And the car, I was watching Star Wars, and like, oh, I'm going to do a bomba. So it's hovering over ground, you know, like the Star Wars, the car that, you know. And so anyways, I'm going to do it about mine. So that's how Ed influenced my own creativity and way of seeing the world. And you know, I can talk a little bit later about his influence in the Beach Flats Park, but I'll hand it over to Irene now.
Great, thank you. Well, you know, I never got the opportunity to meet Eduardo, but I really feel, you know, with the stories shared by Philip and Amalia, I really feel like naturally part of the legacy that Eduardo really, you know, was a catalyst for in Santa Cruz. So I am a graduate of UC Santa Cruz. I studied public art and Latin American Latino studies. I'm very influenced by the murals. Judy Vaca is one of the reasons I wanted to become a muralist. I grew up seeing the Great Wall of Los Angeles here in the Valley, and I would learn about, you know, the disappearing murals in Boyle Heights in Los Angeles. I had the opportunity to travel to Mexico in high school and see some of the work from the amazing muralists, and it really inspired me to become a muralist, not only, you know, to make things beautiful, but really about the truth telling, about the storytelling, particularly the speaking truth to power and uplifting stories of resistance and the stories that are swept under the rug of our marginalized communities. So, but it's interesting. So I kind of fit into the story because of my role in painting the Beach Flats mural after it was whitewashed by the city of Santa Cruz in 2015. But interestingly, even though I had this background of doing arts, I was really in the right time, right place, because I was in the community helping organize against the removal of the Beach Flats garden. So in 2015, the Seaside Company was trying to take back the lease from the garden, which had been there just about as long as Victor's mural had been there, 23 years. So for the garden to be under threat and for the mural to be whitewashed in the same year was just a glaring red flag that these are the indications of gentrification, of displacement, of white supremacy, especially city sanctioned violence against our residents. And you know, if you know anything about the Beach Flats, like the community that tends to live there are predominantly Mexicano, Latino, come from Central America, mostly Spanish speaking, not mostly working class. And so when I had the opportunity to apply to help restore the mural, it was really about healing. It was really about bringing the spirit of the community to uplift that spirit and reinforce the ethos of resistance to displacement. So it naturally felt right to bring in Victor, and really it was around this time that I learned about Eduardo Carrillo and about the legacy of disappearing murals in Santa Cruz. You know, I learned that, so Victor's mural gets erased, and his teacher Eduardo had a mural that was erased, and Eduardo's teacher Siqueiros had a mural erased in Los Angeles. So to kind of see myself in this trajectory of like, oh, you know, there's a clear trend here. And we know that murals are our monuments. They're the way that we can tell the story of what happened, and we can push back against false narratives that like to erase history, erase our presence. So yeah, whitewashing of murals is something that I feel like has been happening and will continue to happen. But the fact that there is such a strong tradition of Chicano artists showing up to, you know, resist that makes me feel really empowered to continue. So yeah, we're going to be sharing more about the story of the Beach Flats mural on the 17th, a little bit more in depth. So yeah, just really honored to be on this panel and really sinking into, so grateful for all of the work that has been laid down before me so that I can stand on the shoulders of these giants.
Well, this is so great. So, you know, please, all the panelists kind of chime in and respond to these, because it echoes what Eduardo said about his teachers his teachers didn't tell him about to look in those books or didn't give him direction. He kind of had to find it. So it's really fabulous, the role of education and just empowering youth. So I loved your story, Victor, and also Irene. You know, speak up now, speak up. So yeah, please.
I think it's really important what the two of you are talking about murals being whitewashed today. And, you know, I think the initial conference came out of that same kind of spirit of, you know, the need for inclusion. And, you know, so many artists, you know, that their work wasn't being shown, it wasn't known, it wasn't collected by museums, it wasn't shown in museums at all. And so these were the artists who came together in the conference. And what I've learned, you know, over the years since then, I mean, this certainly inspired me to be much more active in community art, but I've learned so much about how, you know, the same issues are present in, you know, African-American communities and murals, and Asian American communities and murals, and Native American communities and murals. And so I think that, you know, I mean, it was so important that Ed and the other artists who were involved understood then how if people could come together in dialogue, that, you know, that they could spark some kind of a fire. And that's really what happened. And, you know, what came out of it was so much in the way of scholarship and exhibition opportunities. And, you know, and now, you know, Ed's students and their students and generations are you know, have this understanding and the need to understand, you know, history and community and all of that. And it, you know, in some ways, I think it's really important, you know, that we all keep these ideas going from generation to generation. It's not going to get any easier. And I think the time we're in now, you know, we certainly see, you know, so much of the dialogue is around, you know, like fighting over culture, and, you know, whose culture is the most important and who should be erased and all of this. And I think, you know, our understanding that's come out of this kind of project is critically important to how we understand today. So congratulations to the young artists.
I want to say that yeah, I think murals in particular, but all art forms have an impact in our community. But I always seen the murales as you know, different functioning in different ways. Definitely, it counterbalanced the you know, the infiltration of billboards and all these things particularly in our low income communities, with all these messages. You know, like I always seen, like walking to school, and you'd have advertisements for alcohol, for smoking, for all these things. And you go to our neighborhoods and you just see them everywhere, right? Consumerism, buy, shop, this and that. But it's always, and it is usually images that don't reflect us really. The message definitely doesn't reflect us. So the murales is kind of like this countering into our community that tells that different story and tries to bring some balance. But also in another way is that it's kind of like a song, right? Like the murales are kind of like, it's like this melody that keeps on playing 24 hours a day, all year round, about como una canción. You know, I'm thinking of Los Alacranes or those other artists who are of the time, and children pass by and it sings a song to them, right? And that's kind of like the feel I get, you know.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's really fabulous. And we're going to continue this conversation. I want to open it up also to some of our visitors, you know, our audience too, for some questions. And, you know, I think a few were post in the chat, but just to let you know, yeah, we are going to have a follow-up just specifically on the whitewashing of murals in Santa Cruz, because I've seen a lot of interest in the chat on that. I also know that, you know, we're also going to share a reading list from the Chicano Art, a critical anthology that Jennifer Gonzalez edited and put together. That has a beautiful list for people to read further on the scholarship. And then also and Louise will walk us through the museum again, or the gallery, as well as post some of our upcoming things. But are there any other questions in the chat, Louise, that you see too, or anyone else too from the panel?
A lot of comments of affirmation, which is wonderful. And yeah, a lot of great memories about Eduardo, and that was something else that we wanted to encourage, you know, former students or colleagues of Ed's, if they wanted to share any personal notes about him, it would be wonderful to have in the chat. While people are thinking of questions that they might want to ask, you know, I do have some comments a comment that came from one of my mentors in the art department, Paul Rangel, who shared that his office was next door to Eduardo's for many years. So I'll just read it out loud. I knew Eduardo fairly well. He and I taught a class together for 1 year in 1987, which of course I will never forget. It met every Wednesday evening from 7 to 10 in the seminar room. This was a steady course in the curriculum at the time, when the curriculum was steady, that collected 15 or 16 students in the 5th year program. It was a program that lasted at least a dozen years in the early days of my stay at UC Santa Cruz. A great impact on the art department, a shot in the arm, no pun intended, because each of the students taught a class in addition to having free tuition and a small private studio space to work in for the 3 quarters of study. It helped all concerned, including me, to keep up with the times and have young blood who were determined and already successful in one medium or sometimes more to infuse slightly older and more accomplished practitioners in the class mix. I really love this program, and it is a darn shame that the powers that be jettisoned it years ago. Back to Eduardo, what a fine person, a really gifted, thoughtful, and sometimes quite enigmatic man. His office was next door to mine for many years until his untimely death in 1997 at age 60. We spent time visiting, conferring, and joking after classes in those nice low-hanging oak trees outside the print studio. That is what I miss the most regarding Eduardo, but he does live on vividly in my memory. So I wanted to share that.
Yeah, that is fabulous. And then also, I think Amalia said earlier that she didn't realize, maybe if you wanted to recount that, how important that Califas conference was, or when you said you were so young at the time, but how it's kind of revisiting it. You've had new.
Yes. We had the planning meeting the other day, and Philip and I were sort of informally chatting, and I was remembering so many things, even seeing the pictures, recognizing the young Judy Baca, where she's just maybe 5 years into the Great Wall, and how much that has grown over time. I really enjoyed the conversation with Victor and Irene, because I think that one of the aspects of Chicano art has always been its early function, not just to educate, but to actually circumscribe space, define space in a community. So you knew when you were walking into the mission that that's a barrio. Same thing with Boyle Heights, because Self-Help Graphic was there, Galeria was where we were. You knew because those murals and the windows and the things that happened on the Days of the Dead, they were on the street, they were part of everyday life. And I think that that's the power of the mural in circumscribing space. And there's a lot of work written on something called cultural citizenship with Rina Benmayor and William Flores. And they really talk about how, as Latinos, we make society by our contributions, and that includes our labor, and that we have rights. And one of the rights we have is the right to our own space, the definition of space as an element of our identity. And I think of the murals as part of that cultural citizenship, because they tell us where you are, who lives there, what happened there, and why that area is important. And I agree with Victor that the onslaught of advertising has really made it very, very difficult to maintain murals, because it's much more lucrative for buildings to take on advertising rather than murals. It's one of the reasons that Judy Baca developed the digital mural, which we started also at CSUMB when she was doing it at UCLA, because she was our sort of cohort. And the digital murals freaked people out because they thought it was like advertising. But I think one of her visions behind it is, one, the murals can be portable, and two, if something got whitewashed, you could just do it again. You just print it again, paint into it, and put it back up. So there is a kind of guerrilla element to trying to sustain the murals. But I'm not going to talk any more than that about murals, but just to say that, yes, this happened, Califas, in a time when we were so young, and we were in our 30s some, that we didn't really know that there was this future. That's what I mean when I say prophetic. Do you think we could have ever imagined in 1982 what this world would look like now? How the terms Chicanx and Latinx and all of this view could take place? We didn't. We were just doing a day at a time, a project at a time, an exhibit at a time. And then later we became well known, and then later we began to claim more of the space. But I'm really hopeful that in this younger generation of Victor and Irene and Ella Camuro, so many others, that there's a whole new onda that's going to unfold itself, that's different than the one we did, because culture changes, as he said, it's fluid.
And we did get one last question in from Jennifer Gonzalez about what do you think of the best new directions in Chicanx art, or the most exciting new directions that anyone can list, any panelists, and we can ponder that. We can, and
yeah, that's a big one.
I can speak a little bit. I mean, I just, from what I'm seeing around me, my contemporaries, it's about inclusivity, lifting up all the different ways that Chicanx, Chicane, Chicanx includes multiple identities, multiple gender identities, phenotypes, uplifting indigenous sovereignty. I think it's really about broadening our understandings of what is that category of Chicana, Chicano, Chicane, and how can it be inclusive and nuanced, and still be authentic and distinctive. That's what I'm seeing. And yes, I really believe culture and identity changes as we create it.
Yeah, I want to say that when we did the regeneration project at the Galeria de la Raza, that was right after I got the MacArthur. So I used some of the money to buy a new rug for the Galeria and then to start the regeneration project. This was in the mid 90s, 93 to 95. And what we discovered when all the youth came in, and you could join regeneration from 18 to 35. And many of them had come to us because we were teaching at universities. And it was mostly the comadres that did it. It was Baca and Esther and Carmen. But what we discovered was that this generation was often truly bilingual. They were multicultural because some of them had, African-American, Asian-American, and Chicano backgrounds. That the role of feminism was much deeper and much more active, and that the queer generation was really at the forefront of this. And this was even before trans, although you were beginning to see it then. And for me, many times when I look at the X, I think it's that X of what will be, what we don't know yet, what is unknown, and other people read it as sexual identity, trans identity. But I mean, that's the difference. That's why the work will look different. It cannot be the same. It's very exciting. It's an exciting time
It is
really-
exciting. I agree. And then we're going to do a follow-up, speak up about feminism and, you know, where things are in the Chicanx movement. And we'll have a speak up on Wednesday, February 24th with Amy Diaz Infante and Angelica Muro. So that's really exciting to kind of look forward as well. I also want to just ask Louise, just to show one last time on how to navigate the mural and also give a round of applause for our fabulous speakers. I know it's already, we're out of time, but we want to continue this conversation. We'll post reading lists and all sorts of things, but I wanted to thank you all. And Louise will take it away.
Thank you everyone for your time this evening, and thank you to our panelists. I wanted to share, so I've placed in the chat the link to the 3D gallery for the Eduardo Carrillo exhibition. And so this is how I've included the navigational instructions below here. Some of the basic controls are, if you click on this bottom black menu, it'll give you a few options. If you click Start Autopilot, this will walk you through the entire exhibition, very similarly to the video walkthrough, although a little faster. If you want to navigate room by room, you can also click through the different numbered annotations. And on the very, if you scroll down this page, we've included the names of the artists who are included at the different annotations, and you'll find their information there. So if you'd like to look at Carmen Leon's painting, you can click annotation number 7, and that'll take you to that room. So here, these annotations include the artist labels, but you can see that it obscures some of the frame. So if you click hide annotations, then that'll hide it, so it won't obscure your vision. This model is also, you can navigate it completely manually. And so if you're on a desktop computer, it entails clicking and dragging to change your view and moving your trackpad forward and back to advance. So a little trick that I've included is if you want to change your move from left to right without changing your perspective, you can hold the shift key and that'll help you move around. So this is also compatible with your telephone, with your smartphone. They'll just have pinch and drag as the navigational tips. So below here, I've included all of that information. When you go all the way down to the bottom, this links again to that page from of the 1982 Califas conference videos that we've collected to give some context to what happened then. And again, you can navigate back to the virtual gallery or the main exhibition page. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at sesnon@ucsc.edu. Lastly, what I wanted to give another announcement for is our upcoming events, our follow-up events that are related to the Eduardo Carrillo Comunidad de Califas exhibition. So we've heard from Victor and Irene about the mural erasure at Beach Flats Park. So they'll be speaking more about that on February 17th. And for people who are interested in hearing more about a future Chicanx visual art aesthetic, I would highly recommend joining us for the February 24th event with Amy Diaz Infante and Angelica Muro. And you can register for these events at our website under news and events. And I've also placed the link in the chat. So thank you all for joining us. And I'll give it back to Shelby.
Yeah, thank you. We'll hang on for a couple more minutes just to say goodbye to everyone, but thank you. A really just such a eye-opening and enlightening talk just to hear all of you. So thank you.